Last Friday, a guy named Marcus sat in his car in the office parking lot for 11 minutes before he could make himself walk inside. He wasn't sick. He wasn't hungover. He was just tired in that bone-deep way that no amount of weekend sleep seems to fix. Marcus makes $65,000 a year. On paper, that's roughly $31 an hour. He tells people that number with a little bit of pride because it sounds solid, it sounds respectable. It sounds like the kind of money a functioning adult should be earning. But here's what Marcus doesn't know, and what nobody in HR will ever volunteer. After you account for every dollar he spends just to show up and perform that job, and after you count every unpaid hour his life revolves around that job, Marcus isn't making $31 an hour. He's closer to $8. Some months when the stress spending gets bad and the overtime bleeds into his weekends, he drops below that. He's earning less per hour of life consumed than the 19-year-old at the sandwich shop who clocks out at 5 and never thinks about work again until the next shift starts. That's not an exaggeration. That's not some motivational speech designed to get you to quit your job and sell scented candles on Etsy. That is the result of a calculation that almost no working adult has ever actually performed on their own life. And once you see it, once you run the numbers on your own situation, it rewires how you look at every dollar you earn and every dollar you spend for the rest of your life. My name is Andy, and I've spent an unreasonable amount of time pulling apart the math that keeps people feeling broke no matter how many raises they get. If you're someone who earns a decent salary but still feels like you're swimming against a current, or if you've ever looked at your paycheck stub and genuinely couldn't explain where all of it goes, hit that subscribe button and stick with me on this one. Because today, we're going to do something uncomfortable. We're going to calculate what your job actually pays you, not per hour of work, but per hour of life it consumes. And I have to warn you, once you see your real number, you'll never look at a price tag the same way again. Here's the lie we all accept without ever questioning it. Your salary divided by 2,080 hours equals your hourly rate. That's the standard formula. 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, nice and clean. But that formula has two massive problems baked into it. It overstates the money and it understates the time. It's like a restaurant advertising a $20 steak, but when you sit down, the steak is half the size you expected. And the bill comes back at $43 after fees, tax, and a gratuity that's already been added for you. The menu price was never the real price. Your salary is the menu price of your labor. The real price is something very different. Let's start with the money side because this is where most people's eyes glaze over. And that glazing over is exactly what keeps the whole machine running. Take someone earning $65,000 a year. Before that money ever touches their bank account, the government takes a cut. Federal income tax, state income tax, Social Security, Medicare. Depending on where you live, that $65,000 gets shaved down to somewhere between $47,000 and $50,000 in actual take-home. Most people know this part. It's annoying, but it's familiar. What most people don't think about is the next layer. The expenses that don't appear on your pay stub but exist entirely because of your job. First, there is the commute. The average American drives about 40 minutes round trip to get to and from work each day. That means gas, oil changes, tire wear, brake pads, insurance, and the slow depreciation of a vehicle that's basically a work tool you pay for out of pocket. The IRS estimates the real cost of operating a car at roughly 67 cents per mile. If you're doing a 30-mile round trip, that's about $20 a day just in driving costs, which adds up to over $5,000 a year. And that's conservative. If you're paying for parking in a downtown garage or buying a monthly transit pass, it climbs even higher. None of this is money you'd spend if you didn't have the job. This is a fee you pay for the privilege of showing up to someone else's building. Then there's the wardrobe tax. I don't mean an actual uniform, although at least with a uniform, the company usually picks up the tab. I mean the slow, constant drain of maintaining a professional appearance. Business casual isn't free. Slacks, button-downs, blouses, shoes that look like they belong in an office and not a backyard barbecue. Dry cleaning bills, a decent haircut every few weeks because you're client-facing, or because your manager made a comment about looking polished. For most office workers, the annual cost of looking employable runs somewhere between $1,500 and $3,000. You wouldn't buy any of this stuff if you spent your days working from a kitchen table in sweatpants. It's a costume you fund yourself to play a role someone else wrote for you. But the category that bleeds the most money while getting the least attention is what I call the exhaustion tax. This is every dollar you spend not because you want to, but because your job has drained. You pass the point where you have the energy to make the cheaper choice. It's the $12 lunch you grab twice a week because you didn't have time or willpower to meal prep on Sunday night. It's the $6 coffee every morning because your body literally can't boot up without it, after another night of bad sleep caused by work stress. It's the $45 delivery order on a Friday evening because after giving 50 hours of your brain to someone else's business, the idea of standing at a stove feels like a punishment. Add it all up, honestly. The lunches, the coffees, the convenience meals, the vending machine runs, the energy drinks. For most working professionals, this lands between $3,000 and $6,000 a year. That's not money spent on enjoyment. It's money spent on surviving the week. There's an important distinction there. And then we arrive at the darkest line item, the one nobody puts on a spreadsheet because admitting it exists feels like admitting defeat. Decompression spending. This is the money you burn specifically to recover from the psychological damage your job inflicts. It's the Friday night bar tab that you justify because you earned it. It's the retail therapy, the impulse orders at 2 in the morning when you can't sleep because your mind is still replaying a passive-aggressive email from your boss. It's the subscription boxes showing up at your door because tearing open a package gives you a tiny hit of dopamine in an otherwise gray week. It's the vacation you book, not because you're excited about the destination, but because your body and brain are screaming that they can't handle another month without an escape hat. When you total all of it, the taxes, the commute, the work wardrobe, the exhaustion spending, and the decompression spending, that $65,000 salary doesn't deliver $65,000 of value into your life. It delivers somewhere in the range of $32,000 to $36,000. Let's split the difference and call it $34,000 for our math. Already, your $31 an hour has been slashed nearly in half. And we haven't even touched the time side of the equation yet. The time side is where this calculation goes from uncomfortable to genuinely painful. Your employer says you work 40 hours a week. That number is, and I say this respectfully, a complete fantasy. Let's walk through a real day for someone like Marcus. He sets his alarm for 6:15. He showers, shaves, picks out the shirt that doesn't need ironing because he's already running behind. That's 30 to 45 minutes of grooming that he absolutely would not do on a Saturday. He drives 30 minutes to the office. He works his 8 hours, but his so-called lunch break isn't real freedom. He can't go home. He can't take a nap. He can't run any meaningful errand because he has to be back in the building in an hour. He's being held captive on a short leash. That hour belongs to the job, even though the job doesn't pay for it. Then he drives 30 minutes home. He walks through the door, and for the next 20 to 30 minutes, he's a zombie, scrolling his phone, staring at nothing, decompressing from the day's mental load. His partner asks how his day was, and he says, fine, in a tone that actually means, please don't make me think about anything for the next half hour. That decompression time belongs to the job too. It's recovery time from a thing that hurt you. It's no different than icing your knees after a shift on a warehouse floor. And let's not forget the Sunday night dread. That low-grade anxiety that starts creeping in around 5 or 6 in the evening, slowly poisoning the last few hours of your weekend because your brain has already started preloading Monday's problems. You're physically on your couch, but mentally you've already clocked in. When you add up the grooming, the commuting, the captive lunch breaks, the evening decompression, and the weekend mental hijacking, Marcus isn't dedicating 40 hours a week to his employment. He's dedicating closer to 55 or 60. Over a full year, that's roughly 3,000 hours, not the 2,080 the standard formula uses. So now let's run the real math. $34,000 of actual value divided by 3,000 hours of actual life consumed. Punch that into a calculator, and you get about $11.30 per hour. Not 31. 11. And that's a middle-of-the-road scenario. For people in expensive cities with longer commutes, higher stress, and more pressure to maintain appearances, that number drops to $8, $7, sometimes lower. There are people walking around with what looks like a respectable salary who, in terms of real-life energy, exchanged per dollar received, are earning less than a teenager working part-time at a hardware store. The teenager walks to work, wears whatever they want, and leaves every ounce of stress in the building when they clock out. This isn't just a depressing math exercise. This calculation is the most powerful financial tool most people have never used. Because once you know your real hourly wage, every purchase you consider gets automatically translated into hours of your life. That $150 pair of shoes stops being $150. If your real wage is $11 an hour, those shoes cost you almost 14 hours. 14 hours of sitting in traffic, smiling at people you'd rather not smile at, eating sad lunches at your desk. Is any shoe worth 14 hours of that? There's a concept in behavioral economics called money illusion. It's the tendency to evaluate money based on its face value rather than its real purchasing power, after all costs have been stripped away. Your employer benefits enormously from money illusion. They want you anchored on the $65,000. They want you to feel appreciative about the $31 an hour. Because as long as you're staring at the gross number, you won't notice that the actual exchange, your life for their profit, is wildly lopsided. And it's not just your employer. The entire consumer economy is built on you never doing this math. The car dealership wants you feeling flush, so you'll finance the nicer trim level. The real estate agent wants you buying based on what 2 gross salaries can qualify for, not what your real wages can actually support. The credit card company wants you swiping based on the illusion that $31 an hour gives you room to breathe. Every institution in your financial life benefits from you overestimating your income. The only person who loses from the illusion is you. There's also a psychological trap called the sunk cost of identity. Once you've told people you make $65,000, once you've built a self-image around being a $31 an hour professional, you start spending to match that identity. You buy the car that a $31 an hour person drives. You rent the apartment that a $31 an hour person lives in. You eat at the restaurants that a $31 an hour person frequents. But your real spending power is closer to $11 an hour. You're performing a $31 lifestyle on an $11 budget, and the gap between those two numbers gets quietly filled by credit card debt, missed savings targets, and a persistent nagging sense that something doesn't add up. It doesn't add up because you've been running the equation with the wrong number this whole time. Here's where the system gets especially clever. It doesn't just underpay you in disguise, it actively incentivizes you to make the problem worse. Think about what happens when you get a promotion. You move from $65,000 to $85,000, a $20,000 raise. Your brain lights up. You feel like you've leveled up, but what comes with the new title? More hours, more responsibility that follows you home at night, probably a longer commute to a different office or more travel. Definitely nicer clothes because now you're in meetings with executives and you can't show up looking like you just rolled out of a laundry basket. Your expenses climb. Your real hours climb. And when you do the math again, your real hourly wage might be exactly the same as before the promotion. Or it might actually be lower. You're processing more gross revenue through your bank account, which makes the spreadsheet look impressive, but you're keeping a smaller slice and surrendering a bigger chunk of your life to get it. If you were a business, your profit margin just shrank on higher revenue. Your board would be furious. But because it's your life and not a quarterly earnings report, nobody sounds the alarm. And once you've accepted the promotion and expanded your lifestyle to fit the new salary, you're trapped. This is the golden handcuffs problem. You can't go back to the old role because you've already signed the lease on the nicer apartment and upgraded the car. You need the bigger paycheck now just to service the bigger expenses. You've locked yourself into a job that gives you less freedom per hour than the one you left, and you can't escape because every dollar of that raise is already spoken for. The promotion didn't buy you comfort. It bought you a more expensive cage. This is what I call the efficiency trap. We're conditioned to chase income. Nobody teaches us to chase efficiency. A smart business doesn't just try to grow revenue, it obsesses over profit margin. Your life is a business. Your revenue is your salary. Your expenses are everything it costs you to earn that salary. Your margin, the hours and dollars left over after the job takes its cut, is the only part that actually belongs to you. If your margin is razor thin, it doesn't matter how big the top line number is. You're still broke in every way that counts. So what do you actually do with this? You don't have to quit your job tomorrow and move into the woods, but you start filtering every decision through the lens of your real hourly wage. Can you negotiate working from home 2 days a week? If that saves you 10 hours of commuting and $50 in gas and parking, you just gave yourself a raise your company didn't have to approve. Can you meal prep on Sunday afternoons? Every homemade lunch saves you $8 to $12, which at your real wage buys back roughly an hour of life. Can you move closer to the office, even if the apartment is a bit smaller? The savings in commute time and cost might dwarf the rent difference. Every work-related expense you eliminate flows straight into your margin. It's the cleanest raise that exists. No tax on it, no extra commute attached to it, no boss who can revoke it at the next quarterly review. Here's a number that should motivate you. If you can cut just $300 a month in work-related expenses, things like packing lunch, brewing coffee at home, negotiating remote days, that's $3,600 a year going directly into your real income. At your real hourly wage, that's equivalent to getting paid for over 300 extra hours of freedom. You didn't work a single additional minute. You just stopped subsidizing the cost of your own employment. And consider this. If you take that same $300 a month and invest it at 8% for 25 years, it grows to roughly $285,000. That's not a fantasy. That's the math of redirecting money away from exhaustion and toward your future. The lunch you packed, the coffee you brewed, the gas you didn't burn. Those tiny daily decisions can literally become the difference between retiring at 60 versus working until 70. But the biggest lever isn't logistical. It's psychological. You have to stop treating spending as a reward for the pain of working and start seeing it for what it really is, an extension of how long you have to keep working. Every unnecessary dollar you spend is a dollar you have to go earn, which, at your real wage, costs you far more time than the price tag suggests. That $40 delivery order on a Tuesday isn't $40. At $11 an hour real wage, it's nearly 4 hours of your life. Was that pad thai worth half a workday? When you frame it like that, the answer changes fast. There's also an opportunity cost here that should make your stomach drop. That $5 daily coffee you buy because you're too wrecked to brew your own. Over 30 years invested at a 7% annual return, that's roughly $170,000. You're not drinking coffee. You're drinking decades of compound growth. You're drinking the gap between retiring at 62 and retiring at 68. And the cruelest part is that the reason you're buying the coffee in the first place is because the job drained you so completely that making coffee at home felt like too much effort. The job created the exhaustion that created the expense. It manufactured the problem and then sold you the overpriced solution. The system relies on you being too tired to run these numbers. It relies on you seeing the gross salary and feeling just comfortable enough to not question the arrangement. It relies on you numbing out on Friday, recovering on Saturday, dreading Sunday evening, and dragging yourself back in on Monday morning without ever pausing to ask whether the trade is actually fair. So here's what I want you to do, and not tomorrow, not when you get around to it. This weekend, when your brain is fresh and you're not running on fumes, pull up 3 months of bank statements. Go line by line and tag every dollar you spent that only exists because of your job. The gas, the tolls, the parking, the work clothes, the dry cleaning, the bought lunches, the stress purchases, the Friday night wind down spending. Be ruthless and be honest with yourself. Then subtract that total from your annual take-home pay. That's your real income. Next, count your real hours. Not the hours your badge shows at the office, but everything. The grooming, the driving, the captive lunch, the evening decompression, the Sunday anxiety. Add it up for a typical week and multiply by 52. That's your real-time commitment. Divide the first number by the second. Write whatever comes out on a sticky note and tape it to your wallet or your phone case. The next time you're about to buy something, look at that number and ask yourself how many hours of your actual life this thing will cost. That one piece of awareness, that single reframe, will save you more money than any budgeting app, any coupon strategy, any guru telling you to skip the avocado toast. You're not lazy. You're not bad with money. You've just been measuring the wrong number your entire working life. The salary was never the point. The margin is the point. The hours you keep are the point. The life that's still yours after the job takes its cut, that is the only metric that matters. Stop running faster on the treadmill. Start measuring how far you're actually going. If this video made you rethink what your time is really worth, share it with someone who looks tired on Monday mornings. We're all stuck in this same equation, but at least now you've got the formula to change your answer. Hit that subscribe button because we're going to keep pulling apart these invisible traps until the math finally works in our favor. I'll see you in the next one.